Before we start, hit subscribe, because the truth hiding in this story will keep you up tonight. It began in Wichita, Kansas, 1974. The kind of quiet middle American town where people left doors unlocked and waved to their neighbors. But on one cold January morning, that peace shattered forever. Police responded to a call from the Otero home. Inside, officers moved through the house in stunned silence. The air was still, the rooms disordered, yet deliberate. Every drawer opened, every photograph slightly shifted, like someone had studied the family's life before destroying it. What they found confirmed every officer's worst fear: an entire family gone. A mother, a father, 2 children. No sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, no witnesses. It was brutal, yes, but calculated. The work of someone who planned everything and enjoyed the control. News of the crime spread fast. Wichita had never seen anything like it. Families stopped sleeping with their windows open. Fathers installed locks, and mothers kept the lights burning through the night. Police began the standard investigation. Friends, neighbors, co-workers. But the case went nowhere. Then came the first letter. Weeks later, an envelope arrived at the Wichita Eagle. It contained typed pages describing the Otero murders in chilling detail, details the public didn't know. The author signed it BTK, short for bind, torture, kill. The letter wasn't just a confession, it was a performance. BTK demanded attention, promising that his projects were far from over. Detective Bernie Drowitsky, one of the first on the case, would later say the letter changed everything. The killer wasn't just violent, he was organized, intelligent, and desperate to be known. Months turned into years. Police followed hundreds of leads. Composite sketches came and went. Then, in 1977, another body surfaced, same signature, same taunting letter afterward. BTK wasn't gone. He was watching. By the early 1980s, fear became part of Wichita's identity. The killer seemed to disappear, then strike again. Each time, his letters grew more arrogant, more confident in his invisibility. He talked about his projects, about studying his victims for months. He spoke of control, the need to dominate and manipulate, his chosen form of power. Meanwhile, Dennis Rader, a quiet compliance officer and church council president, lived just outside the city. He was a family man, a Boy Scout leader, the kind of person who helped his neighbors fix their fences. No one looked twice at him. Police, desperate, formed a task force. They mapped every crime scene, every timeline, every word BTK had written. But the trail went cold again. For nearly a decade, nothing. Then, in the early 2000s, long after most assumed BTK was dead or imprisoned for another crime, a new letter arrived. This one was sent to Cake TV. The envelope contained photocopies of crime scene items, a word puzzle, and a message that mocked investigators. "Can I communicate with Floppy and remain safe?" it asked. The killer, unaware that technology had evolved since his last letter, wanted to play again. The Wichita police couldn't believe it. After 30 years, he was back. But what BTK didn't know was that his arrogance would finally betray him. When officers received the next floppy disk from BTK, they traced its metadata to a church computer in Park City. The name embedded in the data: Dennis Rader. They moved fast. Surveillance, background checks, DNA from a discarded sample. Everything pointed to one man, the local church president, husband, father, and former Air Force veteran. But before police confronted him, they uncovered something chilling. Hidden within Rader's home were trophies from his crimes. Photographs, notes, drawings. Every letter BTK had written wasn't a lie. It was a glimpse into his true obsession. The man everyone trusted was the same man who had terrorized an entire city for 3 decades. As Rader drove home from work that February day in 2005, a swarm of officers surrounded his car. He didn't resist. When asked if he knew why he was being arrested, he simply said, "Oh, I have suspicions." In the interrogation room, Rader sat calmly, polite as ever. Then, with chilling composure, he said, "I'm BTK." Detectives stared in silence. The monster who had haunted Wichita was sitting across from them, smiling. He described each crime like a checklist, explaining how he selected his victims, how he stalked them, how he lived two lives for decades without slipping. Every word dripped with pride. By the end of the confession, one detective whispered, "He doesn't just remember, he relives it." Outside, the world reeled. The media exploded. Neighbors who once prayed beside him now couldn't believe the truth. The bind, torture, kill killer had never been a shadow in the night. He'd been standing in the daylight all along. And when police finally opened the small locked cabinet in his home, what they found changed everything they thought they knew about Dennis Rader, and what he planned to do next. They said Dennis Rader looked like an average man. Khakis, tucked-in shirt, glasses that made him look more like a librarian than a murderer. But as he sat in that small interrogation room in 2005, under the cold white light, what he revealed was anything but ordinary. "Tell us about the Oteros," one detective asked quietly. Rader adjusted his glasses, took a breath, and began, calm, detached, like he was explaining a home improvement project. He described every step, from surveillance to planning, down to how he would control the situation. It wasn't rage or impulse, it was calculation, ritual, domination. The detectives didn't interrupt. They barely breathed. When he finished describing that first crime, Rader leaned back, as though satisfied, and said softly, "You want the rest?" And he gave it to them, every detail of his crime spanning from 1974 to 1991. He listed his victims like chapters in a dark book, referring to them as projects. He even had code names for each. He described how he would stalk them, observing their daily routines, learning their habits, their fears. But what chilled detectives most was how ordinary his life seemed outside those moments. He worked as a city compliance officer, issuing citations for overgrown lawns and stray pets. He was a church council president, a Cub Scout leader, a devoted father. On Sundays, he led prayers. On weekdays, he hunted. To his neighbors, Dennis Rader was the man who waved from his driveway, who volunteered at community events. They couldn't comprehend that the same man kept trophies, Polaroids, newspaper clippings, jewelry, from his victims in a locked compartment inside his home. At home, Rader's wife Paula lived in quiet disbelief. She had no idea that the man she'd shared a bed with for over 3 decades was BTK. Her world collapsed when police searched their home and found the evidence. Drawings, written confessions, even a neatly kept logbook cataloging his crimes. The police soon realized Rader wasn't just confessing to his crimes, he was proud of them. He wanted to be remembered. In his mind, BTK was his legacy. Investigators found hundreds of pages of handwritten notes. He described his fantasies, his frustrations, his fear of being forgotten. It wasn't just about violence, it was about recognition. He'd craved the spotlight from the beginning. That's why he sent those letters. That's why he resurfaced after years of silence. And it was that need, his arrogance, that caught him. During the months following his arrest, the trial became a nationwide event. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Journalists from all over the world arrived in Wichita. Everyone wanted to see the man behind the mask. Inside the courtroom, Rader was unflinchingly composed. He represented himself with a calm, almost bureaucratic demeanor. When asked if he understood the charges, he responded, "Yes, sir, I do." Then, when asked if he was guilty, he said, "Yes, I did it." The courtroom froze. He then began describing his crimes, publicly under oath, in the same chillingly casual tone he'd used in interrogation. Every word was methodical. He showed no remorse, only pride in his success. One juror later said, "It felt like watching 2 people in one body, the neighbor you'd borrow sugar from, and the monster you'd run from." As Rader spoke, the families of his victims broke down in tears. For decades, they had wondered who could have done this, and now they faced the unimaginable truth. It was someone who looked just like them. But even as his confession went viral, Rader couldn't help himself. He smiled when reporters mentioned his nickname. He enjoyed the cameras. He wanted his story told, his projects remembered. FBI profilers began studying him, his pathology, his patterns, his need for control. They found that Rader fit almost perfectly into the mold of a narcissistic psychopath. He didn't kill out of rage. He killed to feel powerful. To him, each victim was a character in a twisted play where he was both writer and director. Meanwhile, detectives were still combing through his belongings. They discovered detailed hit kits he'd kept ready for future crimes: ropes, duct tape, tools. He'd been planning new attacks even in his later years, well into his 50s. The discovery was devastating. Wichita had finally caught BTK, but not before realizing how close he'd come to striking again. During his psychological evaluation, one doctor noted, "He doesn't think he's evil. He thinks he's exceptional." Outside, Wichita began to heal. The once terrified community began reclaiming its peace. Yet, for many, that peace was fragile. Knowing that the man who terrorized them for 3 decades had been sitting in church pews and coaching scouts left a scar that never truly faded. As the trial neared its end, prosecutors revealed Rader's final letters, unsent drafts he had written to local media. In them, he lamented being caught, not because of guilt, but because his projects would never be completed. When asked if he ever thought of his victims' families, Rader tilted his head and said, "I guess I do now. But back then, it was about me." That line echoed through the courtroom like a ghost. On August 18, 2005, Dennis Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms. He listened quietly as the judge called his acts unspeakable and beyond comprehension. Then, in one final haunting act of control, he smiled and said, "The judge was fair. I'm satisfied." The city of Wichita collectively exhaled. The monster was finally caged. But for the detectives who had chased BTK for 30 years, one question remained. Why stop in 1991? What had changed? No one knew, not even Rader's family. But deep down, some investigators feared he hadn't truly stopped. They suspected there might be more victims, people who vanished quietly, whose cases were never linked to BTK. The files remained open, and even from behind bars, Dennis Rader seemed to know it. In one of his prison letters, he wrote, "Remember, you can't catch what you don't see. There's always more under the surface." And with that, BTK reminded the world that some monsters don't die when you lock them away. They linger in memory, in fear, in every unanswered question. The morning after Dennis Rader's sentencing, Wichita felt eerily quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. News vans left. Reporters moved on to the next headline. But the people who lived through BTK's reign of terror couldn't simply switch off the fear. It lingered, in locked doors, in restless nights, in the way parents looked twice before letting their kids walk alone. For the detectives who had hunted him, closure was supposed to come with that final gavel strike. But something about the case refused to rest. Detective Ken Landwehr, the man who led the task force that caught Rader, kept a small folder on his desk labeled Unconfirmed BTK Leads. Inside were a handful of cases, missing persons, unexplained deaths, each one carrying whispers of a familiar pattern. Rader had confessed to 10 murders, but some believed the number was higher, much higher. Weeks after Rader's imprisonment, the police received a strange letter, no return address, no fingerprints. Inside was a simple message, typed neatly. BTK is gone, but his projects are not. For a moment, panic stirred again. Was this another follower? A copycat? Or something darker? Another message from Rader himself, sent before his capture? Investigators traced every clue. The paper was common, the ink generic, no DNA. But the phrasing projects was unmistakable. It was his word. When detectives confronted Rader in prison, he only smirked. "I told you," he said, "you'll never know everything." Even behind bars, he enjoyed the game. But prison couldn't stop the passage of time. Years went by. His hair turned white. His letters to reporters slowed. He spent his days cataloging his life, writing, sketching, reminiscing about his projects. Psychologists studied him. Students wrote theses about him. He became the subject of documentaries, podcasts, endless speculation. And that was exactly what he wanted. In 2016, a journalist named Megan Rhodes began investigating BTK for a true crime documentary. She'd grown up in Wichita, just blocks from where one of his victims once lived. To her, it wasn't just another story. It was personal. She spent months poring over files, interviewing survivors, even writing to Rader himself. To her surprise, he responded. His first letter began, "Hello, Megan. I hear you're telling my story. Let's make it accurate." It wasn't remorse, it was collaboration. Rader saw himself not as a monster, but as a misunderstood genius of control. His letters grew increasingly manipulative, filled with cryptic references to unfinished projects and loose ends. One day, Megan received a small hand-drawn map. It showed a wooded area just outside Park City, Kansas, marked with a red X. She turned it over to authorities immediately. The police searched the area, half expecting another taunt. But deep in the woods, they found something real, an old rusted piece of tape, a torn scrap of fabric, and a length of rope buried beneath the soil. The evidence was degraded, nearly untraceable, but it reignited a chilling question. Had BTK left something behind they'd never found? Rader denied it. Then he smiled and said, "Maybe I was planning something there. You'll never know." That's when the investigation took a darker turn. Detectives revisited old cases, cold files from the late 80s that bore BTK's hallmarks. The patterns were faint, but they're forced entry, bindings, missing personal items. But without DNA, it was impossible to prove. Meanwhile, Megan's documentary grew into a national phenomenon. Viewers were captivated by the contrast, the image of a church-going family man who spent his nights dreaming of domination. But what truly haunted them was how long he'd gone unnoticed. How many other Dennis Raders were out there? During one interview, Megan asked him directly, "Do you think there are others like you, men living double lives?" Rader looked straight into the camera and replied, "Oh, I know there are. Some of them are smarter than me." It was the kind of line that froze the room. By the time the documentary aired, Rader's health had begun to decline. Age had dulled his body, but not his mind. From his cell, he watched the coverage, smiling faintly as his story once again dominated the headlines. To the world, he was a murderer behind bars. To himself, he was immortal. But then came the final twist, one that silenced even him. In 2018, Rader's daughter, Carrie Rawson, published her own book. It wasn't about the crimes. It was about the aftermath, the shock of realizing her father was BTK. The man who taught her how to ride a bike was the same man who'd taken 10 lives. Her story painted a picture Rader couldn't control, a picture of the families he destroyed, the innocence he shattered. When Rader received the book in prison, witnesses said he stopped writing letters for months. For the first time, it seemed the control was gone. Inside that cell, the man who once saw himself as the puppeteer of fear faced the one truth he couldn't escape. His own legacy was now written by someone else. Still, his story refuses to die. True crime communities continue to dissect his methods, his psychology, his mask of normalcy. Every documentary, every podcast, every interview adds another layer to the myth of BTK. And yet, behind all the fascination, lies a simple, haunting reality. Dennis Rader wasn't a monster who lived in shadows. He was a man who lived among them. He was the neighbor who waved, the father who smiled, the church leader who said grace. That's what made him terrifying. In the end, BTK didn't just bind, torture, and kill his victims. He bound an entire city in fear, tortured a generation with doubt, and killed the illusion that evil has a face you can recognize. Today, his cell remains small and quiet. No letters, no cameras, no audience. Just a frail old man staring at the wall, whispering to himself the three words that defined his life. His mantra, his confession, his curse. Bind, torture, kill. The screen fades to black. A faint voice echoes. They thought the story was over. But evil doesn't end, it just changes its name. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next case.